Hey guys, how's it going? Good evening. I hope your week is going well. Tuesday right now, so I hope you are doing really, really well. We're gonna get started in just a second. Today's webinar is gonna be really, really powerful. It's a topic that I love to talk about, specifically because I just feel it comes up so regularly. We'll be talking about specifically fear, where it comes up in life, and more specifically, we'll be looking at where it comes up. We'll be defining it. So, what is fear from the context of like sort of like psychologically and mentally what is it, what is that like, and then we will finally be moving towards looking at specific tools and strategies that you can actually use yourself to basically move past the fears. So if you guys are joining, feel free to drop a line in the live chat window. I'll be taking questions at the end on anything that you sort of want to cover. So feel free to drop a line. Let me know who's there, how you're doing, anything like that, and I'll get back. I'll get back to the questions towards the end of the session. So yeah, I guess I just want to I want to kick this off by saying, first of all, I want to explain why I wanted to host this webinar tonight and why it was so important that that I come on and do this, because I host webinars pretty regularly, about once or twice a week, and I do a lot of Facebook live streams, and for those of you who do not know me, is Nicholas Charlet. I'm one of those global nomad kids growing up all over the world. I was born in Japan and I lived in South Africa, Austria, Germany. I studied mechanical engineering in the US. I worked consulting for a few years, and slowly made my way towards self-development, inspired by guys like Jack Canfield, Tony Robbins, all these guys who are just freaking amazing in the motivational space and the inspirational space, and sort of self-development as such. But yeah, the reason why I wanted to speak to you guys tonight and do this webinar and have it also on YouTube. So if you're watching this later too, I really hope I really hope you enjoy it. Is because I realized this is something that is so core to my own story, to my why, to what inspired me to initially get into the self-development space. Just because, you know, growing up, I was a very different person. I was not into public speaking. I was not about Facebook live streams. I was not about social media. I was not about any of this self-development stuff, really. The best way I could describe myself, like growing up, was being really quite lethargic. Like I really I I really sorry, I'm just gonna grab a little bit of water. Oh, that's better. So I don't know what it was. I think, the way that I grew up, or the way my story, panned out, was basically, I was part of a family where my father was a high flying executive, so he's done really well. He traveled around the world, and he worked in management, which was awesome, and it provided us an amazing life. But at the same time, growing up, um, he had a very strong presence. So creating a space for myself in itself was a little difficult. And making myself be heard, was at the time, it felt just harder. Again, that's my story. That's the one I was telling myself, but or not even telling myself. That's just what I felt. But that's what it was like. And then on top of that, I have two older sisters that are amazing, and I get along with them really well. Today, and they're amazing. I love both of them, and at the time, they were both, and they still are, huge, like hugely energetic and inspired. And again, they took a lot of the space, a lot of the energy in, again, the family kind of like room, which made it harder for me to kind of stand out. And now you're probably wondering, why is this guy just telling me his life story here, and his, it sounds so tragic, really not. But it's because I want to outline something. Before I had this epiphany about this self-development journey, that's who I was. I was someone who was lethargic. I was someone who didn't want to step into the spotlight. I was someone who was scared to shine bright, and to share my story, and to get out there, and freaking make things happen, to start my own business, to quit my 9 to 5. That was not who I was at all. Like, now I've done all those things, but in the past, growing up, that was not me. I was literally that shy guy. I had trouble, creating a presence. I didn't feel like there was enough space for me. And from this derived kind of my passion for self-development, for working with people who potentially have a bright shining light inside of them, but necessarily always show it, and don't necessarily step up to the plate. And this is where it ties in specifically with tonight's webinar topic. Is, you know for me, making this realization that I wanted to work with these people enabled me to really see that my past being, sort of that guy who was quite scared to step into the spotlight, who was quite lethargic, who lacked any motivation, drive to step out of my comfort zone. I went from being that guy to the guy who actually set up a coaching practice, who quit his 9 to 5, who started finding clients, paying clients, who sold. Selling for me was a big thing. I didn't have the self-confidence growing up. Like I said, with my dad in the background, he had a big presence in the house, and then, my 2 sisters taking up a lot of attention. There wasn't much space for me. And so, the reason why this topic is so dear to me tonight is because it is because of my story, the fact that I didn't feel like I had a lot of space for myself at the time, that I didn't have a presence, that I wasn't shining bright, that eventually I was able to step out of that, and to really take up more space, and to realize, okay, now I do want to live my life on my terms. I do want to push the boundaries. I do want to step into my light. I do want to make things happen. And really where this topic of tonight came from, because at the end of the day, if you want to shine bright, and if you want to make things happen in your life, if you want to take the opportunities, the possibilities that are given to you, you are going to have to step out of your comfort zone, and you are going to have to face your fears, because generally, and unfortunately, life's a bitch like that, but you know um ultimately, your biggest cravings, the things you desire most in life, are very tied to your biggest fears. At least that's been my experience, and a lot of my clients too. So, today's session is also about that. How does fear manifest itself? Then can we define it? Can we look at what fear is, and then finally look at specific practical tools, tactics from some of the top names out there, whether it be Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, whether it be any of the other big names out there. Can we find the strategies and the tools, and I will outline these later, that specifically take you from a state where you feel like you have no way of actually turning up, you feel powerless, to turning up relentlessly and saying, I'm gonna freaking get there, and seeing the fear, seeing it for what it is, and then freaking pursuing it regardless. And that's the big difference. I've been emailing you guys throughout the week, but that's one of the points I made. The difference between a leader and someone who isn't a leader, there's very little difference. The difference is, well, there's hardly any difference, but actually it's a huge difference. It's leaders, what they tend to do is they see the fear, take action. And it's a small distinction. They see the fear and they still take action. Whereas most people see the fear and they back away. And not only is it, not only do they step away from their greatness in those moments, but they step away from achievement and everything that would be possible if they just stuck in with it. So I hope this gives you a bit of an outline of what we're going to be discussing tonight. So it's going to be ranging The session should take about 45 minutes to an hour for us to cover all points. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the live chat window. It's on the right hand side, and I will answer these at the end, or as I'm going. And feel free, if you are joining, to drop your name. That way I do know who is on. But yeah, I think the first thing I'd like to highlight is, everyone faces fear, whether you're a top athlete, a top comedian, whoever you might be in this world, you ultimately will face some fear or other. Everyone has fears and insecurities. And so, for me, the fears that resonate a lot with other clients and people that I speak to, are things like, I used to be scared of speaking to girls in cafes. Like, that was a fear of mine, one that I got over. I used to be really scared of public speaking. I was that like silent class clown, so I loved the small groups and like making my close friends laugh. But as soon as there was too much attention upon me, like, I would sort of shy away and I would rather like get quiet. That's what sort of growing up in like high school was like for me. Like, I liked joking around, but not when there was too much attention. So I was quite scared of public speaking. And again, moved past that. Now I do like Facebook live streams. I speak at events. I've totally flipped that around. And again, guys, I'm not illustrating these points to brag or anything. I'm illustrating these points because at the end of the day, your fears will change throughout the course of your life. But every time you face a fear, it's basically, if you imagine your comfort zone, being this big, every time you face a fear, that comfort zone, what essentially will happen is it'll sort of grow. It'll grow in line with the fears that you decide to tackle. The more fears you tackle, the bigger that comfort zone will become. And so that's what I'm trying to outline here. I used to be scared at the prospect of running my own business, starting my own business. That seemed unfathomable. Today, I'm running my business full time. I was scared of rejection. Got a ton of that starting my business. I was scared of selling. Didn't know what was really involved. I was scared of going after my dreams. Like, what would it look like to shine bright and to do things on my terms? Didn't know how that would look like, but I decided to go for it anyways. I was scared of the spotlight and the being the focus point of too many people, which has changed today. Hosting webinars, being on Facebook live streams, posting regularly on Facebook and across Instagram. At this point, I don't fear that anymore. And I was scared I might not be able to coach my clients to the highest level. So again, a fear that I might not be able to serve my clients to the highest of my abilities. But today I do it passionately, and I do it and I get better every single day because I'm on this mission where I've realized every time I push my fears, every time I step up my game, delving into my fears, the results are that much more amazing, and my life becomes that much more amazing because I start living in the presence of that fear and stuff. And so it's literally liberating. It's liberating. It's like a breath of fresh air. And that's what we'll be talking about towards the end, looking at tools and tactics and strategies for how to specifically tackle your fears. Because if you're feeling the fears like I did with so many of these items, and I still have fears and insecurities, but it's about stepping into them as regularly as possible. I think there's one of those quotes or one of those tactics they talk about, which is, do one thing that scares you every single day, and you'll just be so much better for it. Expand your comfort zone. So the first thing I wanted to do with you guys is talk about what is fear, because I can talk tactics and I can talk strategies and I can talk tips and tactics and all of it. But ultimately, what's good is if we think of fear as this big, hairy beast, something you don't want to deal with, if you stop for a second and just realize, okay, what is fear, right? It's actually a protection mechanism that's set up by your psychology, through your psychology, however you want to see it, basically, like, in the caveman times, like, we used to fear like lions eating us or bears coming after us, or so that part of the brain actually helped protect us. So by having that fear and by looking out for ourselves and running if we saw a lion or a bear, or picking up a spear to protect ourselves, that was actually a really useful tool to have. How it does not serve us today is the fact that there are no more lions out there. There are no more bears. So the circumstances have changed slightly, yet we still have that psychology. It's born, it's biological, and it's within us. And so the idea is to say what happens when you fear something. So with regards to public speaking, for example, let's just bring up a concrete example. Um, Public speaking, why does it scare so many people? And what is fear? Well, actually, what fear is basically a projection. it's a projection of it's the projection of a potential outcome. So I just want to drop that for a second, and allow you to maybe just picture that. It's a projection. So from your mind, projecting out like an image, um, of something that could potentially come to life, right? Potentially become a reality that you would be a part of, right? Standing on stage, in front of all these people, and maybe messing up, or people laughing at you, or forgetting what you were going to say, but basically what your mind is doing is it's creating a fake, because it doesn't know how it's going to play out. So the best thing it can do is project. So it's projecting a reality that it believes, or it's not really thinking, is it? But it creates this projected reality, which you then internalize and see and feel as an emotion of fear. And so what happens is in that projection, you actually start feeling like, oh crap, when I step up there on stage, what if? And so this what if scenario basically is what really drives that series of fears. And regularly it's kind of unconsciously, it's kind of happening in the background, but it's all these things. What if I lose, what if I lose face? What if I lose respect? What if people realize, that I'm not as great as, like, I say I am, or that I feel I am? Like, all these things, all these fears start coming up, although they might not have nothing to do with anything. But that's kind of what stems from it. And I didn't want to go deeper really than that, because I just think at an essential point, it's great to look at the basics. What is fear? Fear is a projection. It's a projection of something that could come true, but but in a lot of ways, generally is not the way things turn out. Is just generally not the way it turns out. Sometimes it is, sometimes it is. But what I'd like you to do right now is think for yourself. What is something in the past year, in the past 2 years, in the past 5 years, something that you really, really feared, something you didn't want to do, whether it was a presentation, whether it was asking a significant other out, whether it was, quitting a job, joining a new one, or starting your own business, or whatever it was, joining a team, trying a new instrument, doing dancing, whatever came up, and it was a fear of yours. It was something you'd been wanting to do, but you're like, I really am fearful of it. And my question would be, of those things, the ones that you actually did. So pick an example where you feared it, but then you still did it. What was the actual outcome? So there was a projected outcome, which was that fear. So the fear of the thing that you were going to do, and then there was actually what happened. And what's interesting is, if you pay attention for a second to your specific example, whatever it may be, public presentation, or quitting your job to join a new one, or committing to someone for a long-term relationship, or whatever it may be specific to you. But the idea would be to say, was it as monumental, and was it as crazy as your friend over here had projected it to be? you know. And just from that essential point, it becomes clear that at a logical level, and I'm not saying this is all logical, because at the end of the day, emotions come into play with fear, you know, so it's not all logical. Logically, you know, there's things you should do, but then the fear still holds you back, right? But at a logical level, you know, empirically, so with data to back it, through experimentation, through your life, things you've done that scared you, you know that the outcome is not always as projected in your mind, and generally it's not. You know, even if it is a pretty bad case scenario, it's generally not what has even come up in your mind. Like, your mind does its best, but is generally not that great at predicting what will actually happen. Or at least in my experience and in the experience of my clients, that has generally been the case. And so the question becomes, okay, so fear is a projection of what could come true, of a possibility, of something that could happen, right? So what do you do with that, right? Because at the end of the day, like we said, logically, you probably know, okay, I should just tackle this beast. I should just get it out of the way. I should put it behind me. People always say, get out of your comfort zone. Right. Well, you know, that that really, I mean, in a way, I kind of hate when people say that, because I feel like it gets you absolutely nowhere. Get out of your comfort zone. That's not helpful. Um, like, you know, like, it's something you say sometimes, but like, it's really actually not helpful. There's nothing actionable about that. Get out of your comfort zone. Like, what is a comfort? Like, I don't even know where my comfort zone is. Can you draw me a circle of my comfort zone? Like, it's not actually a real thing. So again, it's a metaphor, but it doesn't actually help you action anything. And for me, hearing about this comfort zone again is something that really, it got me triggered for a long time. And I was like, okay, shit, I really need to find for my clients, and for my audience in general, like, a different way to put it in context, so that it's not about getting out of your comfort zone, but instead it would be about something actionable, something that you could actually do in a moment where fear takes you. Um, Finding ways, you know, as you might know, I don't know if you know this or not, I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins. If you're not aware of him, definitely check him out. He's the sort of the top guy in the self-development industry. And he always talks about, with regards to fear, he always says, the best way to go about it is to dance with fear. So most people try to fight fear, so they try to, like, struggle with it. Instead, and he does this demonstration with people on stage, at his events, Unleash the Power Within. He literally gets someone on stage, and like, they'll kind of like try to fight each other for you know, when you're fighting the fear, and it's just unproductive and nothing happens. And then he does this example where they're actually dancing, and everything just kind of goes smooth as they're dancing around and just moving and just kind of playing around with it. And I like that example, because these are the tools and the tactics that I'm going to bring up in a second. This is what dancing with the fear is. It's not trying to hide the fear, avoid the fear, step around the fear. That doesn't work. The fear is there. It's a psychological construct, right? We talked about it. It's that psychological construct, the projection of a reality that may or may not come true, right? So what's important here is not so much to hide away or find another way through the fear, or, you know, all these things. Again, great metaphors, you know, build a door so you can walk through it, you know, and you know, if that helps you, if that metaphor does help you, then use it. But what I think is even better is actual strategies, tactics that can actually allow you to see a different way forward, strategies that you can use starting tonight, starting tomorrow, whenever you're watching this, you know, basically to start tackling your fears. And so the first one I wanted to talk about, which is a really basic one, but actually one that I have used a lot since I heard it. I'm a big fan of Lewis Howes and his podcast, and one of the guests he had on there was a woman called Mel Robbins, and she came up with this crazy strategy, basically, or not crazy, just a unique strategy that basically changed her whole life. And it was called the 5-second rule. And what it did for her was for a long time she struggled actually getting out of bed. She struggled getting out of bed to go to work, to work on her business, because things weren't going so well financially. They were, she was having struggles with her husband. They were maybe gonna have to lose the house, all these things. And so getting up in the morning just seemed like a nightmare, having to go back to it. And despite all this, she came up with this strange strategy that seemed to work for her, and I've used it since. Like, it's basically called the 5 second rule, and the idea is that if you give your mind less than 5 seconds to sort of deal with a challenge, an obstacle, something that could become a fear. Basically, if you give yourself less than 5 seconds to action on it, it will actually get you through the fear point. It will actually get you to action, to act on whatever you need to do. Sounds super basic, super simple, but I've used this myself, and basically the idea is that once you pass 5 seconds, and for some it's 4 seconds, so it's basically just whenever you have an idea, just kind of be like 1, 2, 3, and then just like dive into it. And the reason being that, what a lot of people tend to do is when they're looking at fear, they say, I'm gonna outthink this. I'm gonna outsmart this fear. So I'm gonna look at it. I'm gonna take it in, and I'm gonna analyze it. I'm gonna analyze the shit out of it, and I'm gonna figure out what it takes to navigate this fear. The idea is that the longer you spend thinking about that thing that you fear, the more it sort of like grows in your mind, and that projection of what could happen, you come up with all these crazy ideas, and they build on themselves. So what Mel Robbins said was basically, okay, count to 5 and then just freaking action. So what she did is she gave herself less than 5 seconds, or 5 seconds only, and then she would just go at it. So she would count, and then she would just boom, get straight into it. And what it does is basically it doesn't give your mind the time to create that projection of fear, or at least it doesn't give it the full autonomy to fully figure out what a bad reality or fearful reality of what could happen would be. And so that's the first tactic. It sounds super simple, but again, guys, something I really want to emphasize, because I just think it's so important. Do not forget that most of the time in life, like the simplest, most basic things are the most important. They are the ones that make the difference. So don't underestimate the simple, the easy, the basic things out there, because basically those are the ones that actually tend to work the easiest. They work the best just because there's not too much to put into place. This 5 second thing, you can do it tomorrow. Starting tomorrow, next time something that you feel you might have to fear, that you might fear, something that you might not, might pull away from, action it. 5 seconds, give yourself 3 seconds, and then go after it and experiment it. Again, my style of coaching is very much with my clients. I always say, let's experiment. Let's check it out. Let's see if this is you. Let's see if it works for you. Let's see if it changes things. I'm not saying this is your end all solution to everything. This is me saying to you, this could work. Why not try it out? So that was the first strategy. The second strategy that I wanted to talk about was basically Tony Robbins' RPM method. So I told you I like Tony Robbins, and I would talk about him. But basically, what the RPM method is this idea of having this outcome. The idea of the outcome first, the purpose second, and finally the how. So how to go about doing it. And the reason you do it in that order is basically so that you're driven, your emotions are pushing you to go at it. And why is it relevant to this subject tonight, to the fear, is because generally when you're scared, you're not thinking about the outcome. You're not thinking about why it would be beneficial. You're just in a state of fear, and your emotions are just not supporting you. And so the idea would be, with regards to that thing that does really scare you, how would it change if instead you said, what would be the outcome? So again, like for whatever it ended up being. So let's say it was quitting your job. So what would be the ideal outcome of quitting your job? having that in mind. And then, what would be the purpose? So what's your why? Why does this need to happen? Is it because you're really unhappy at work? Is it because you want to live lifestyle that's on your terms? Is it because you want to increase your financial situation? Do you want to increase your family time, whatever it might be for you, but just finding the why. So you have the what. I want to get out of my job. It's scary, but then boom, you hit yourself with a why. You ask yourself the why question. Why is it important that I do that? And once you have those two pieces, then all of a sudden the how, which is the actioning part, it's the part where you take the action. All of a sudden you've reframed the whole thing, and it's not about just quitting your job. It's about so much more than that. It's about creating a financial freedom of some sorts, or creating a lifestyle on your terms, or going to travel more, or spending more time with your kids, or whatever it might be, whatever's relevant for you. But you've changed the whole notion of what it would mean to accomplish this. So that is basically the second strategy, is to look at basically at the purpose, and the purpose being that why, and realizing, basically creating the emotions, that the excitement related to actually achieving the outcome that you are looking for. So that is One by Tony Robbins. And like I told you, you should definitely check him out if you haven't gotten to know the guy. Really, really inspirational, really amazing, and he will change the way you live your life. So I know, big words, but trust me on it. So the next one was related to visualizing the situation. And this is because what tends to happen is, again, with this projection, you tend to create a projection, a reality that's not real, right? But that begs the question, okay, mind. So you've created this reality that's scary, one that creates fear, right? So by that same notion, would it be possible to create another reality? I mean, the one that your mind is creating, the one that creates the fear, that one's not real either, right? It's a made up reality. It's a projection of something that could happen, which it won't, or it might not, or it could, but it's not necessarily true. So by those same means, would it be possible to also flip it around and say, okay, well, if your mind can create a projection of something so terrible that might happen to you, well, what if you flipped it around and actually used it to your advantage? So what if you told your mind, or started projecting or visualizing a scenario where everything went really well? So in your mind, you practiced at night, or before or in the morning, or just regularly throughout the day, you just pictured yourself, visualize whatever you're doing happening really, really well. And they've done studies that visualization is a very, very powerful thing. From they've done tests where these shooters, these basketball, they asked some kids to basically shoot basketballs, and initially some of them shot basketballs, and then they sort of like measured how many went in, how many didn't, for each of the kids. And then finally they asked one set of kids to to just practice for another minute or two, or like for 10 minutes or something, to start like shooting the balls. And the other kids weren't even shooting the balls, they were just visualizing. They were visualizing the ball going into the net. And basically it's just to say that when they brought the kids back and they asked them to do the experiment again, it turns out the kids were just visualizing shooting, as opposed to those who were practicing actually shooting. The kids who were visualizing actually did better off than those who were actually practicing shooting for that same amount of time. So it's just to say the power of your brain. If you visualize that scenario going in your favor, working out really well for yourself, then all of a sudden the dynamic of what would be required to do it changes. Because if in your mind, public speaking goes amazingly, and every day you project in your mind, you're like, oh, like in your mind, you're just imagining this perfect thing where, you know, at the end of your talk or your speech, like everyone stands up and is just like clapping, like giving you a massive applause, that everyone is completely engaged and looking up at you while you're speaking. It's obviously going to change the dynamics and you know, really drive you to accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish and to move past the fear, because in your mind, yeah, there may be that fear, but there will also be the positive outcome, the one that your brain is not so great at projecting, but the one that you've decided to project alongside it and maybe to replace. So that was the next tactic, guys. So one to really use, I regularly use visualization. Quickly gonna plug in power supply. See, we are running low. But the next one is actually really good too. So, oh, I love the next one because basically the next item involves it involves the idea that you place too much importance on the one time that you're doing whatever you're going to do. So kind of like an all or nothing thing. So with regards to, for instance, like, you know, for whoever it is, you know, that's watching, like if you wanted to speak, you're at a bar and you see sort of like an attractive person across the bar and you want to go speak to them, you know, the idea would be, what are you telling yourself? What's the internal dialogue? Is the internal dialogue, oh, if they reject me, this is going to be terrible and like I'll never go up again? Or is it like, and this is what this tool is, this is what the strategy is this just an experiment? Is this just a way to test things out and to see how it goes, to test one specific way and then see what comes out of it? And basically, by doing this, it can fundamentally change the way you see rejection, failure, all these things that are related to fear. So what's really important is to know is the way you view whatever action you're going to take. Is it the end all of everything? If it doesn't go well, what does that mean for you? Is it the end or is it the experience? You know, that's what's really key to really have in mind, is to really say, you know, this is a numbers game, that ultimately, you know, if this doesn't specifically go exactly to plan, and quote unquote it fails, it's a numbers game. You know, it's you know, whatever it might be, public speaking, even if it didn't go as well as you'd want it to the first time around, it's about getting back on it and trying again. Entrepreneurship, if you start a company and it doesn't work, and by the way, 90% of companies fail, so chances are you're going to be starting a few companies before it works, or at least changing your company up and molding it until it does work. Chances are you're going to go through rejection and failure. And so the idea would be, if it's a numbers game and if it's about experimenting and testing and seeing what you need to do, what are different ways you can try until you get the result that is required, that you desire, you know, how would that change the game? What if I said to you, you know, what are 1,000 different ways you can try that thing that you fear, such that you get the outcome that you want, you know? And that would completely change everything that you were trying to do, you know? So another really good one to have in your back pocket is just that, to remember that it's on to the next, on to the next, on to the next, just a numbers game. And Zig Ziglar said it best. He said, repetition is the mother of learning, the father of action, which makes it the architect of accomplishment. So he said, Zig Ziglar, big guy in the motivational space, self-development. He was one of the founding fathers of coaching. He mentioned repetition, the mother of learning, the father of action, which makes it the architect of accomplishment. And that pretty much sums it up. I mean, I don't feel like I need to say much more with regards to that point, but, you know, repetition. doing the thing you fear, doing it multiple times, putting yourself in those situations such that, and we talked about that comfort zone, it doesn't help to say step out of your comfort zone. What does help is if you fear public speaking, is in getting in front of 2 people. That can be public speaking. Then get in front of 4. That becomes public speaking. Get in front of 7. Say something. Go to a dinner party. Be the one that stands up and propose a toast. Use the 5-second rule, Mel's 5-second rule when you're doing it. You don't want to do it, you're scared. Well, only give yourself the time, start knocking on the, get up to propose your toast. And that's basically exactly what Zig Ziglar was showing is repetition is the mother of learning, the father of action, which makes it the architect of accomplishment. So it's literally every time you do it, you'll get better at it, and so therefore you get more used to it. It'll become more something that you are comfortable with too, and therefore your comfort zone will grow and you'll become better at it as you go. So if it's something that's related to accomplishment for you and reaching success, then it's all about taking little steps to get there. So I hope that made sense. Like I said, feel free to post questions in the sidebar if you guys have any. And what I'd like to finish on, and it's actually kind of ironic because the last point I finished on was talking about the comfort zone, but I think with regards to taking all of those actionable items, those concrete practical items that we've discussed, so I'll just go through them real quick. Whether it's Mel Robbins' 5-second rule, so don't give your mind more than 5 seconds. Go action before you start thinking about it and creating that monster, the fear monster that comes up. Tony Robbins, thinking about the outcome and the purpose. So outcome, what do I want and why do I want it? As opposed to thinking specifically about the worst case scenario, which is what fear is. Think instead, okay, if I presented, and if I did that public speaking stint, and I'm just bringing up public speaking because it's a common fear among people, so it's easy one to delve into. But if I did that speech in front of 100 people, I would share my knowledge and my purpose with everyone else, and they could really grow and develop, and I could really make a change and serve people powerfully. Boom! All of a sudden, you have a purpose, you have a specific outcome. All of a sudden, it changes the dynamics of public speaking as opposed to just being talking to people. Now you know why you're doing it. A lot more powerful. There was visualizing. So if you can project fear and project a terrible scenario playing out, you can also project an amazing one. This one you can create for yourself and sort of replace the negative one with your positive one. And then finally, viewing every experience as an experiment to just get better at whatever you're doing. Basically, it being a numbers game and everything being an experiment, not being a final, just a final round of something. Just allowing yourself to progress every little time you can, and moving forward in your journey. And finally, so the underlying theme around all this is tied to your comfort zone, and basically just saying that your comfort zone expands in direct proportion to the amount of actions you take outside of your comfort zone. So a personal example that I was going to just bring up for myself was, and if you're an entrepreneur and you've started a business, maybe you can relate to this, but my biggest problem last year was becoming a qualified coach. That seemed like the biggest problem for me, or the biggest challenge or obstacle. How was I going to do that? Okay, I started my certification, I started working on all that. Okay, so I dealt with that. I knew what I was doing. Okay, so that was no longer my obstacle. So my comfort zone had grown a little bit. Then my next challenge or obstacle on my coaching journey was building my business. How was I going to create a business? How was I going to set up my website, create a company name? In my case, that's a little easier because it's called Nicholas Charlet, Ltd. And I was like going to create a logo and some printing cards. That became the next big challenge or obstacle that I was facing. How was I going to do it? I didn't know things. I needed to learn. Action, action, action. And here I am with a running business. I've quit my 9-to-5. I have my business cards. I have my website up and running. I've got my or a couple of things I had said there. Yeah, I had my company name, of course. And I have paying clients now, and again, so once I had my website up, what was the next thing? It was, okay, how do I actually make this, what is a business? A business is something that provides a lot of value for people. And in response, the market provides you money back in return, right? So you need to be a profitable business to stay in business. And for me, it got to the point where, okay, how do I find paying clients? And then finally I found paying clients. I learned how to sell, how to have a selling conversation. And that got me to the point where, you know, I was running my own business. I'd quit my 9 to 5, and I dealt with all those fears, and those were huge fears at the time. I didn't know how to sell. I didn't know how to have a closing, a selling conversation with a client. I didn't know how to, coach properly before. But every time that I've had to deal with these situations, and again, going back to this numbers game, the more that I dealt with them, the better I got. So again, really reemphasizing this point that, you know, it is a numbers game. So whatever it is that you fear, also do it once, then do it again and again and again and again until you get that outcome that you are looking for. And you know, that pretty much sums it up. And I don't really want to make this webinar any longer, because I think we've touched on all of the major points. Those are all the key points that are there. This is really it. That's what dealing with fear really is about. And the final thing I will really leave it on is I want to reemphasize that point that I made very early on in this webinar, which is that ultimately what you fear is hardly ever as bad as what it actually ends up being. So to say that your mind's projection is pretty freaking strong, and it's pretty good at creating these terrible scenarios, but ultimately things don't tend to be as bad as you perceive them to potentially be. And so that's just encouragement for you to go out there and make it happen. Like I said, I waited really, really long to go out there. For those listeners that weren't there at the beginning of the webinar, I just said this this webinar was really key to me because, growing up, I didn't feel like I was shining my light or really living my purpose or doing something that was worthwhile. I was shy. I always held back. I was scared to be noticed. Like I said, I was this class clown, but I was the silent class clown. So silent class clown. So tongue twister. Silent class clown. And basically, like, I didn't want to be in the spotlight, so I would joke around with my friends, and as soon as we got too much attention, I would kind of go quiet because I didn't want all that attention and stuff. And, it was through my journey and through my experiences that I realized that I was missing out. And especially due to a mentor of mine, which is actually my sister, she showed me the way forward. She showed me that I was being lethargic, and I wasn't turning up, and I wasn't shining my light brightly. And all these things just pointed me in the right direction. Today, I'm on a path where, I'm coaching, I'm coaching people every day. I'm coaching amazing clients, awesome people every single day. I'm running my business full time. I'm looking at different businesses with friends of mine. I've quit my 9 to 5, and I'm really living a life that I freaking love. And that is what life should be like, at least as far as I'm concerned. This is life. It's walking into your fears every single day, getting closer to an ideal life, a life that you love. And so this is really an encouragement, to push you wherever you are in your journey. But tackle your fears, get on them today, get on them tomorrow, because ultimately the faster you do it, the faster you deal with them, the faster you'll move on to something else. And the beauty, and this I promise is my last point before I leave it, because I could go on forever. But what's the beauty with fears and dealing with them is, when you've dealt with one of your fears, what's great is, pretty much in general, you don't really have to deal with that one ever again. So a new one comes up, of course, you get new fears and new insecurities, but ultimately you build that muscle of dealing with your fears, so it helps for the next one. But also, you just don't even have to worry about that one anymore. So this is, again, an encouragement that if you've been wanting to do something, go out there and do it. Go out there and make it happen. the sooner the better, so you can move on and really live out your life passionately and with purpose. So that is where we will leave it, people. I hope you've enjoyed it. What I will do is I will drop my website into the link. And if there are fears that you're trying to tackle right now, or challenges or obstacles that you're facing, and you would like to speak to me about it and talk about some of these strategies that you'd like to implement, then I'd be more than happy to discuss those with you. So I'll put that in the comments. I'll also leave them in the notes below. And with that, it's a wrap. So I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. I'll be back on next week, and yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Keep tackling those fears, and feel free to leave comments to let me know what you thought about tonight's webinar. Great to have you all on. Talk to you later. Bye bye.